You got this, and you got that, and you gonna murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'm gonna put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Only Friends podcast. I gotta tell you, my T levels are high. We got Jesse Sylvia in the building, baby.
He always gets my T levels high.
Sorry, I don't mean to accost you like that.
Let's go.
As you walk in the door.
No, I appreciate that sort of intro, sir.
We missed this yesterday, but it's probably better reserved for you being here today. Huge shout out to the one and only Theo. Happy birthday, Beans' son.
Let's go,
Happy
baby.
birthday,
Happy
baby.
birthday, Beans' son.
Let's go. Somehow my internal clock year after year just happens to register with Beans' son's birthday. It happened last year. We were in Big Bear, and just out of nowhere, we were in a CVS parking lot, and I look at Landon, and I go, I think it's Beans' son's birthday.
He was right.
Sure as shit it was. And this morning I was like, I think it might be Beans' son's birthday again. It happened to be yesterday.
It was yesterday.
So congratulations to Theo. Made it another year around the sun.
Yep. You're 4.
Maybe. Don't know what Beans is up to these days.
Don't know what his son's up to these days either.
Yeah.
Better that way.
Probably better. Free Beans, man. Hashtag free Beans. Let's get him back out there. Mm-hmm. What was he really guilty of in the end of, like this man's behind bars and we got fucking Vertucci out here just grabbing people by the pussy.
My.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't really grabbing, more like displaying.
Figuratively speaking, of course.
Hey.
The metaphorical pussy.
Yes, the metaphor. Right, correct. You have any thoughts on that before we get into things? I know.
Why are you doing Jesse like that?
Oh yeah, I got some thoughts.
Because he told me, he literally goes, I want to talk about Vertucci.
I mostly just wanted to drop the nickname I came up with, Vertucci, which isn't that impressive. But,
no, that's so good.
But I wanted to say it in the chat.
Vertucci is very nice.
I like Vertucci. That's good. Yeah.
You're pretty close with Kitty. What did you think about the story she had to tell in her response?
I mean, the way she said it was just the most Kitty thing ever. I feel like her Twitter has been on a very, very shallow downward trajectory with engagement.
She's a mom now.
And maybe she's tweeting less and whatever. And like to watch her just reestablish GOAT status on Twitter with such an impact was just really incredible.
I mean, it's very like showman, he won't tweet for a long time. We'll have a banger. He's still around.
Yeah.
But he's not there often.
Yeah.
Like the Ivy tweet playing golf, like hundo. Cart girl, hundo.
Did you see the video he put out about Dankness asking for his UFC pick?
That was so good.
Bro, I
emoji.
died. I watched that video like 8 times in a row. I was cracking up.
So good. For
the Timex apology.
Anyone out there who hasn't seen that video, just search on Schulman's timeline. It's not very far back, but basically...
he's just
Dankness reached out wanting picks, only to then later call Schulman a mush.
And he faded all of them.
Now he faded all of them.
Great heat, buddy.
Speaking of fading them all, do you dabble in the Circa Survivor each year?
I have in the past. I haven't in a few years.
You gotta get in, bro.
Well, we're in the mix this year.
We're in it, baby.
We
Let's
are
go.
one of 200 remaining.
Yeah.
Chiefs,
the Chiefs
baby.
won last night.
Love the
wow.
Chiefs.
How many start? Like 5,000 or something?
14,000
and change.
Wait,
Down to
wow.
200.
How many are left?
200. Maybe 201.
Let's go. How many teams do you guys start with?
10. We're down to 1.
Okay.
But we're doing a lot better than 13,800 people.
Yeah, that's
So
you're doing real nice.
We're cooking with
Nothing
fucking
like
grease.
math.
I was
and
nervous
logic.
a little bit last night when Mahomes threw that pick in the end zone right off of Juju's hand.
When I saw Taylor in the stands, I knew the script was written.
I kind of figured, they weren't gonna do Taylor like that.
No.
Right?
That was
I got to tell you, no offense to our dear Steelers, but man, isn't it refreshing to root for a team that's actually really good at football?
I told Matt this.
It's a different experience.
I told Matt this in the
really
first half. I said, man, how nice is it to look at a team that can play offense?
Yeah. I was like, oh man, Mahomes is so good. And I was just like, I miss those days when we were just like dominating teams. Now we're just,
Yeah, I mean, there's,
We're average.
there's
I mean-
a part of me that really loves watching the dominant defense perform. The problem
that
with the
is true.
dominant defense
Yeah.
is that if you're not scoring alongside of it, it
Doesn't-
still just comes down
doesn't
to that
help.
last fucking
Yeah.
drive.
It all ends
Exactly.
in heartbreak.
And it's like, how many times can you stop?
And guess what? That's why the Steelers win half their games, they lose half their games, and
That's
here we
why they
are.
didn't beat Dallas.
Yeah, that is why. But nevertheless, we're in the running for
Let's
14
go.
million
Man,
LGL.
right now.
Could it
Our,
happen?
Wow,
It could
14
happen.
million.
our team is worth like 70K right now.
yeah.
Let's go.
Our entire team minus one Andy Zoos.
Yeah, we kicked him out.
F in the chat.
Well, there's an inherent value in there too, because if you get to like the last 3 people, for instance, generally you'll be in there with some people who aren't, seasoned gamblers, and they will want
Like
to
us.
chop. Yeah, they're gonna want to chop, and if the
mix
chop's
the
in your
chop.
favor, you can take it. But if you have like a great team left, you just get to like run it with your equity, which is insane.
How rich is this guy?
Can you just run it? $14 million?
You could find someone to buy a piece.
I mean,
I'll
you
buy a
could-
piece if you got the better equity.
Okay.
Jesse
all
wants to
right, all
swoop
right.
I'll
in at
give
the
you the
end.
chop amount, guys, if you have a nice spot.
Oh,
Okay,
damn.
that's I
Well,
like
not
to
for
hear.
14
How's
million.
this
but-
guy?
Yeah, how rich?
I can de-risk a little bit. You want to sweat? I'll give you a piece of my
I think
equity.
there are a lot of
Let's go.
ways. I think there are a lot of ways that you can insure plus EV endeavors. Like like Landon's
For sure.
saying, now is probably a good time to start de-risking as we go. I don't know how much of the market exists for this,
Well, there's one Jesse Sylvia.
but yeah, there's a Jesse Sylvia who might be interested in
He's
a
ready to
little
fire.
taste here and there. But once you get down into like the double digits, I would imagine that there's some. I haven't really thought this through all that well, but I would imagine there's some opportunity to kind of hedge where, you can just lay a large amount. I guess it's difficult though if there's like 20 left and it's clear that the pool isn't going to end that week.
Right.
Right. Because like if you lay like 20K on the team that you're fading,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and you lose and they lose or something along those lines, like you kind of just get
You would just always, at least in Survivor, most of the time, I imagine, it's very rare that you actually pick an underdog as your choice. So you're always going to get plus money when you hedge.
Right. You just
So
hedge
it's not
against-
possible
yeah,
to
That's true.
That's true.
lose,
That's
and
true.
You can't
Mhm.
lose twice unless you take points.
right.
Right.
Also,
Right.
you could the amount you bet could be based on the percentage of the field that's on other teams.
Oh, that's actually
This is why he wants a piece, bro.
Because you're right. They give
Get me in
the
there.
they give the numbers out midday Saturday. You wouldn't have to get your bets down until
Sunday,
early
Saturday
Sunday.
night.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
so you have like maybe a 12-hour window,
Right.
Yeah.
16-hour window
After
to
the
like
Chiefs
figure it out.
won, I DM'd Matt, or I texted Matt, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you want more action, but if you want more action, I'll de-risk a little bit. And you go, I am not everybody's exit liquidity.
Yeah, it's like these assholes. These assholes like.
It's like, hey man, I didn't have to sell it. If you wanted more, you could have
No,
some.
zoos too. Fuck you, all you guys. These guys all jump on board week one. They're like, oh, let me get a piece. We're putting in 10T. I can afford the fucking 10K gamble myself. I don't need anybody to take a piece. But I'm a generous guy. I want to get rich with my friends, so I sell half of it off. Now all of a sudden we're week 6.
No, trying to
The fucking the entry's worth like 60x what it originally was, and
71.
everybody's like, hey, you want to buy that equity back? It's like I would have just fucking kept it when it was only worth $1,000.
Hey
But
man,
no, I don't want it now.
I didn't.
What if it was at a
That's all-
discount?
That's all you had to say.
Yeah, half.
Half.
What
Nice.
aren't you
Guy
get?
half.
Like what aren't you understanding? I
What do
sold
you
him
mean?
10% for $1,000.
Yeah.
Right.
You want me to now buy that back for $7K?
I didn't
but
want you to. I was asking if you wanted it.
If 1% is worth $700, you wouldn't buy it for 6 or 5.
Probably not. I have almost
650?
60% exposure. I need to, you're in a position to de-risk, not to take on
I
risk.
only
Thought you knew a
asked-
deal when you would see one.
I only asked him.
It was a deal when we hadn't put a pick in yet, and it cost me $500.
I only asked him in case he wanted it first, not
No.
to sell to you.
No, bro's just trying to fucking.
I'm gonna sell it to Jesse now.
Well, yeah, now.
Well, I don't know. You already used the Chiefs, I guess.
yeah, but it
Nice
was
initiative.
really wise to use the Chiefs.
I told myself I'm not going to sell anything until my piece is worth $10,000.
Well, we're not far off. Maybe another week.
Well,
Oh, wait, you have 5%.
no, I have 2.
Oh, you're drawing dead. What? It would have to be down to the final 100
Yeah,
people,
if I
or
had-
final 10 people.
Okay.
I had 2.
Okay.
No, 14.
14 people? Okay.
Yeah.
He's
No,
done
no,
math.
no.
Yeah.
More. 28.
Okay.
The piece is relatively worth like a decent amount of like my overall net worth.
Yeah. Yeah, but the issue is that it's a shitcoin. And there isn't much of a buyer's market out there. There's some. There's a lot of trust involved. It's not an easy
Most
thing.
shitcoins go to zero.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
And this baby's probably going to zero.
Well, what do you think the buyers are thinking, Landon? If you're so quick to
Jesse
want to
sees
de-risk.
opportunity. I'm not so quick to de-risk. I'm willing to give some equity up to one Jesse Sylvia on my right.
He's doing you a favor.
I'm
really.
already invested in a shitcoin called LOL, so I might as well buy your.
Might as well buy NFL.
Right. Yeah.
Is
Do
it
you sell
common-
half when it doubles?
Is
that
it
how
common
works?
to lose half the field over a weekend?
No, this is very rare. I think it was maybe the week after Thanksgiving.
This whole
last year.
season, this whole season is rare.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Well, just to be down to this, we're
Right.
down to 2% of the
so
field.
many big favorites
less,
lost
like
Less.
1.5% of the
in
field.
the first 5 weeks. So many big favorites lost, and that's obviously why where we're at.
Yeah,
98%, man, that the Seahawks are going to win.
Conrad, for what it's worth, the resident sharp.
Just the 98%.
Is that what I told you? 98.
So everybody
That is
obviously,
nice.
It's 97.8.
everyone was obviously on the Seahawks this week.
What's the line of the game?
They were 7.
Yeah, it started at like 6, and I think it went all the way up to 7.5.
Yeah,
maybe.
so they were playing the Giants. The Giants had a few key players out. The Giants are a really terrible team. Conrad, being Conrad, can't accept math for what it is. We're like, their win percentage is somewhere between 70 and 75 based off of every model that we've seen. He's like, no way. There's no world that Seattle loses this game. They're 97.5% to win.
Conrad has entered the chat.
And I said, I'll, anything you want to bet, I'll bet
It's
against
crazy.
those odds.
Because
And
when
of
you-
course,
Just play me 19.
of course, Seattle loses.
Wow.
Because why wouldn't they? Lessons need to be learned. Life does a good job of handing them out from time to
Man,
time.
it's just so funny in the sense of like Conrad said something like this a long time ago, and I was like, okay, like I'm willing to bet you at a little bit less than the price that you're saying is what it is. He goes, fuck you.
Right.
And it's like, hey man, I'm just trying to keep you accountable for what you're trying to say, and somehow this is me being the asshole.
Obviously, he's being a little give him the benefit of the doubt of being a little hyperbolic. Like when he says,
little bit,
when he says
maybe.
98%, like he's just he doesn't truly believe that. Like I think he'd be a little bit more closer to what Vegas is saying,
I don't know.
but not.
No, bro, he called me up and told me you give me 49 to 1.
I think he just has a general disconnect from actual math. And it's not just Conrad. I think this is a very I think the general population is plagued
Right.
with this, where
No,
they don't
for
think
sure.
probabilistically.
Right.
And something that feels like a heavy favorite, the difference between being a 70% favorite and a 99.9% favorite is one and the same. Like it just feels the exact same.
Right.
And it's not, like I said, it's not just him. Like Andy sold his piece because he was so hell-bent that Seattle had to be the pick and that we had to save Kansas City for Christmas, which conflates two things. One, it's disregarding how owned Seattle is going to be by the field and how much we benefit if they lose. But secondarily, it's implying that Kansas City is going to be such a heavy favorite over the Steelers that the other two games aren't even remote options. And we were looking at projections, and like the delta between the closest match game, which is, I believe, Seattle-Chicago currently, was like 51-49. And the Chiefs-Steelers, which was the heaviest favorite, was the Chiefs were like 56% to win.
Imagine if the Steelers.
Really?
Imagine if the Steelers.
This was before
yeah.
Sunday, but yeah.
Imagine if they beat.
I mean, they're going to Pittsburgh in prime time
imagine if they
on
beat
Christmas.
Kansas City for us to win the whole thing.
Honestly, I don't even know. And this,
That would be
this is the other part of it.
amazing.
I don't even know if this contest will make it till Christmas.
It might not. It might not. And to Zeus's defense, a little bit, he did acknowledge that. He did say that like there is I do recognize that there is a percentage chance that it doesn't make it that far.
By the way, that whole
Just
like
trying-
people not understanding probabilities and betting, I see it a lot in UFC fights or just betting on fights, because there'll be a spot where, a person's like 11 to 1 and they'll be like, he never loses this fight. And it's like, just bro, this is a fight. Like
Right.
so much crazy stuff happens in fights. Remember when
Like the Leon Edwards fight at the very end.
yeah,
against
or
Usman.
Yeah, or like that was crazy. By the way, I had Leon Edwards in that fight. By the way, imagine a young Jesse at 2 a.m. in Massachusetts just looking on his iPhone and watching that knockout, not in real time because I'm on some pirated
Right, of
stream.
course.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Anyways, yeah, but like who was?
I feel like
O'Malley
every single Chris Cyborg fight was like what you're describing right now.
Yeah.
Like she was always like a 15-1 favorite or something.
Yeah.
Like, it was just crazy.
Well, like you just have these weird injuries too, right? Like stuff happens. O'Malley got kicked in the like a nerve in his
Against Cheeto.
And like his Achilles tendon. It was like a freak accident.
The sheer variance of gambling in general is like something that's completely overlooked. Like when Conrad's, I hate to keep using him as an example, it's unfair to him, but like when he says things like that, it's like you're basically saying you're sharper than Vegas, and he's like they get lines wrong sometimes. It's like very rarely
they do, and when they do, they're off by a little bit. They're not usually not off by a lot. Like I mean not results oriented. I mean, they're just like, oh, they should have lined it this way.
Sure.
And then I think the sharps that's when they come in and can, get
sure,
an edge,
there's like a big difference between getting 9-1 on the money line and 3-1. Or sorry, laying 9-1 versus laying 3-1.
Yeah.
And it's like when you imply that they miss it by that mark, by that big of a margin, where it's like Seattle money line is like minus 320.
You should be so rich.
And you're saying that,
Absolutely
you're saying that it should be like minus 950.
Yeah.
It's like if you actually think that delta exists and that they missed it by that fucking much, then you should you should just mortgage everything, right?
Yeah.
But like you shouldn't in practice because they don't miss that badly ever. And all we can go off of is that data. So it's like when we're making these decisions, it's nothing but hubris to just default to our emotion and say like, I don't know, man. I just don't see a world where Seattle loses. It's like, how about Geno Smith breaks his fucking ankle the first play of the game?
Right.
You know?
It's so crazy.
Unless McGregor's fighting Mayweather. Then if you got 4-1, you actually pulled it off.
That was one of those scenarios where I think, because the line jumped around so much, where I think like the public just so heavily influenced the bookmakers.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
for sure.
That like anybody who was relatively sharp was basically just like alongside with the book printing off public money. You know what I mean? But that's super rare. Like you won't ever see that in the NFL or MLB because there's never going to be such a fan base that's so blind. You'll see it in politics. Like I think this is why we didn't get to talk to Barbara about it yesterday, but it would have been a great conversation. This is why betting on things like presidential elections and presidential races where people are just so hard in their camp and so uneducated, and I'm one of them. You know, I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody, but you vote with your heart. You know, you vote with your allegiance, whatever the case may be, and that's rigid. So it becomes a little bit more predictable to the sharps, where it's just like, okay, well, I've been paying attention to the tone of the way this is going, and I think that it's mispriced terribly in one direction because all of the money's coming in from the left or from the right or whatever the case may be.
Also, I think there's a lack of liquidity there, so you can move markets very easily.
Right, there's a lot of that they're talking about that on poly market now, where they think that like it could be Elon, it could be these other big whales coming in and taking huge amounts of money on Trump, which is pushing the market, towards his favor. Like if you look on poly market, he's like a 6-point favorite. It's like 53.47. But then if you go over to predict it, where the cap is only $800 or $850, it's like Kamala by 2.
It's kind of nice in the sense of like ARB spots you probably are able to get.
Yeah.
Where you can just take the better price.
I think Kalshi is where you'd probably want to do that because, like I said, like how much of an arbitrage can you get if you can only put $800 on it, like on Predictor where it's capped? But like if on Kalshi, where there is a huge difference there is an arb probably.
It does feel like there's a lot of free money situations like that to come up, especially when it came to earlier in the presidential race, or someone getting the not Biden bets. Like that was super sharp. Like Dan Zach was one of them. A bunch of people got on like the non-Biden train, just made a bunch of money.
Yeah, and obviously the post-election wins.
Oh my God, that was the freest money of all time, probably.
Those are just scenarios where it's like, that's where I think like bets are on the board that would just never actually be posted. It's like no book in the world would actually take the other side of that one. Like nobody.
I
would
got
ever,
some money on
Yeah.
that somehow.
Right, there just isn't like proper odds. So like when you get 20-1 on something that's like 99.99999% likely to happen,
Right.
like yeah, you're just fucking printing. You could lay the longest odds in the world, and you're probably never going to see it come to fruition.
Right.
I think about that bet a lot because it's basically like essentially a conspiracy theorists meet reality.
Right.
And like normally when you have like if you have like let's say a cult, right, and they predict when the end of the world happens and then it doesn't.
Right.
And then like, oh, we talk to God and there's a different end of the world happening.
There's just another one.
Yeah, you're able to move the goalposts pretty easily, like in terms of public like backlash. But as soon as you have bets involved, it's very clear where you made the mistake and it's pinpointed. And I really appreciate betting for that exact reason. It was like, yeah, guys, you were wrong about that one. There wasn't some like coup on the 6th or whatever. I mean, there was an attempted coup, but there wasn't some like secret underhanded thing going on that made Trump the president.
Right.
Well, there was like, yeah, and you are wrong, and you will financially pay for it. It's like there's a cost.
Yeah, that's
versus
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly. That's the
versus
thing.
saying things like, oh, like I got it wrong. Like, okay, but you didn't lose anything. All you lost was.
and I think that was Barbara's point yesterday when he
Street
was
cred.
talking about, people so haphazardly spreading misinformation where there's just no punishment. And, he kind of mentioned the fact of like, well, I think the way around that is to just challenge people to bet on things, even if it's a small amount, right? Like just making people back their opinions with $1 here and there.
I tried that. I got yelled at.
Yeah, it's like a means of keeping score. But you're right. Like people don't want to do that because it feels so aggressive. It feels like you are
It's like obviously
attacking them in some.
I'm talking too wide, or I'm too hyperbolic, or whatever. It's like, okay, then give me the price that you actually want, and then we'll have a discussion.
Right. And it's a great way to make people walk things back.
It is.
in real time.
Sorry, Conrad. But if you
or
asked him
insult
to
you.
give you the correct odds of like, give me whatever it was, 49-1, he's not going to do it.
Right, and that's what that exercise was supposed to be. It was like, okay, just please give me a win percentage here that you think Seattle has, and he just jumps to the most.
I mean, I'm guilty of it all the time. I say the shit.
I'm super hyperbolic.
Right, and you'll be like, well, bet me then. I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I didn't really mean what I said.
Right.
In my heart, I do, but reality is a different thing.
And that's fine in casual conversation.
Yeah.
It becomes a lot different whenever you're like boasting it on a platform of sorts and trying to propagate it as truth. I think that's where it becomes a little bit problematic. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to a different sort of contest. Yesterday, we put out our first clue for the NAPT scavenger hunt that we're running. We're going to be giving away one gold pass. These gold passes are going to get you to Las Vegas. It's valued at $10,000, includes a $5,300 entry to the PokerStars NAPT main event here in Las Vegas at Resorts World, 7 nights accommodation at Resorts World in Vegas, and $1,800 in travel and expense money, which will be paid out to the player once they arrive. So, we're going to get you nice and cozy here in Vegas if you get this one right. The way our contest works is we're going to give you 5 clues. Those clues are going to sequentially go together to complete a puzzle. Once you're able to complete that puzzle, you have one final riddle to solve. The first person to solve it correctly wins the pass. Very easy.
How do they submit the answer?
You'll see. They'll know by the end of the puzzle.
So that's part of the whole thing.
The puzzle will direct you.
Gotcha.
And the first piece is out today.
First piece came out yesterday. It's a picture of Las Vegas as seen. I think Guapo might have already pulled it up, but as seen on our Twitter page.
Okay.
So there you go. I'm going to give clues here on the podcast to coincide with these ones. This one, it's a little bit too much of a key clue.
So tuning into the podcast can actually help you.
It can help you. Yeah, it can help you. This one's a bit too much of a key clue. I think if I give you the kind of like tug on a leash to get you to arrive at the answer to this one, it'll make the rest of them too easy. So for future clues, I will give you a bit more of a follow-up here on the pod. For this one, just stick a pin in it. This one is it's a keystone clue, if you will, from the Keystone State. Not actually the Keystone State. This is Vegas, but just bear in mind this one's going to be the one that unlocks it all for you.
Silver State.
Yeah, we are the Silver State, but I wanted to give the Yinzers their shout out as I always do when I'm here.
Shout out.
Alongside this are some other contests that are taking place right now. Poker.org, they kind of fooled us a little bit. Last week, they announced that the Runner Runner was back, and then they followed up with some cryptic text that Brad Willis put out saying, "We regret to inform you that we won't be running the Runner Runner." And they kept saying we over and over again. I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed that the timeline was off and like they were just going to run it for something else. But today, in the newsletter that Brad does, he sent it out and confirmed that the Runner Runner is back. So there seem to be some clues in this newsletter. Off the top of my head, what I've noticed is that it's from not Brad Willis instead of Brad Willis, which usually, and the title is a bit different. I think, Wapo, you have the list of...
This is what we're talking about right
now?
now?
Yeah, this is what we're talking about. So it's not Brad at Poker.org. And it's not the org number 59, where usually it's just the org. We are in control again, like we is the common theme. The note is the runner is somewhere, but they don't have the gold pass to the PokerStars NAPT Las Vegas main event. We do. I don't know who we is, but we have a little bit of a preview for what you guys can expect. Have you guys seen this runner contest?
What kind of show is this, anyway?
You thought you were playing a game. That wasn't a game.
Are you ready to run?
Are you ready to run?
Are you ready to run?
It's not going to be like last time.
Are you ready to run?
It's this time.
Are you ready to run?
Attention.
So much sense. We think
Do we have your attention?
Are you ready to run?
They will be found. Are you ready?
Have you guys seen this runner?
Scared.
I'm not scared. Very Saw-esque, if you will.
Yeah,
Shot.
it is.
We have a tale of two cities here. We have the scared and the not scared.
It looks like there's a we involved. I don't know. Maybe it's French. Oui means monsieur.
Spelled different.
Is it?
I think so.
I don't know.
Or maybe the runner's name is We.
Maybe they're talking about P.
Maybe it's Qui.
We shall see.
What a time to be alive.
Imagine it's Vertucci.
Oh my God.
He's running from something else, man.
Could you imagine?
Bro is on the run. He's not to be seen or heard from. There's grumblings that Hustler is going to be releasing a statement today. I don't think that's gone live yet, so we'll probably talk about it tomorrow. But this whole thing is shaking out to be pretty wild. Nothing too new came out. There was
that came out.
I love that, by the way. I absolutely love that.
Got my Valentine's Day card from Michelle.
Yeah, gotta get those T levels up, bro. And Nick did seem to make an appearance yesterday at the Hustler live stream, pencil in tow. I don't know if you guys saw Melissa. She happened to retweet the photo of him, Wesley, and a couple crypto guys.
Some good words right there.
What, the
pencil in tow?
Pencil in tow.
That was nice.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have that one, Guap?
I showed it yesterday, but I'm looking for it now.
There, I got it. It was up yesterday?
I thought I put it up, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a lot of memes coming out of this one. I think we're hitting the meme cycle of it all, which is
what the internet does.
It's a good sign of healing.
Yeah,
it's a good place to be. The main topic, though, for today that we're going to get into is this article that came out in Bloomberg. I want to say it was like maybe 10 days ago. Held off on discussing it because I was off gallivanting around Dubai and I didn't want to do a half-assed effort on this one because I think it's important. This is mainstream media. It's a 40-minute listen. It's quite the article. I don't know, 5,000 words maybe more. Very interesting, actually. Like the way that it's written it's as much of a story as it is informational. But yeah, it just kind of goes further into detail about things that we as the community maybe have speculated on for quite some period of time. The key points, as they're mentioned, date all the way back to pre-Liberatus. I want to say that this is going back to like the early 2010s.
When I think he said 2011 or something.
Yeah,
2011 through 2013.
Yeah, I think you're correct. It began with a challenge to play heads up limit hold'em, where he himself felt like he was being botted against, and that then led into this whole construction of a company that ultimately, basically jumped off botting at scale. So yeah, by the early 2000s, there was, just to give a brief history, by the early 2000s, there were already the construction of limit hold'em bots that were able to compete against and then eventually beat humans. You may have seen some of these bots make their way into casinos for a brief period of time. I don't know at what point they actually took those out. Do you remember those limit hold'em machines that they had on the floor?
Oh, they don't have those anymore, huh?
No, they took them out, which is interesting to me because I'm not sure why.
They had one at Red Rock.
Did they? Yeah, they had one at Aria too. I remember Durr made a huge crossbook versus somebody one night. We were playing in the big game in Ivy's room, and somebody laid a huge number to him that he couldn't beat the limit hold'em bot. I don't remember if he won or not, but I think at the time he felt he had an edge because he had recognized a pattern in the algo. So like with certain things that would occur, like you just didn't ever fold, or you folded early with a hand that maybe like you wouldn't. I don't remember what the outcome ultimately was, but I do remember him having like a high degree of confidence that he could beat the machine. And those machines did make their way out of the casino. So I don't know, maybe the overall bot itself was a bit flawed and humans started to beat it for, like, maybe it was a plus EV gamble for somebody who was sharp.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember Durr saying that he could beat a computer playing perfect GTO strategy, and I always thought that
well, that's just...
Yeah, so I always kind of took his
really
thoughts
stupid
on GTO with a grain of salt. But
yeah, the thing with like the limit machines in casinos is I don't know how much of it was perfect game theory versus just like a very simple algorithm that adhered to basic game theory. You know, like, well, when we look at like solves for no limit, we have to do a lot of batching and basically trimming of the tree. And I would imagine that especially like the early versions of those limit bots probably did a lot of that as well.
Yeah, there's only one bet sizing, but it's still hard to imagine they had that level of computing power. I mean, this is something that was like industrial, so maybe they had access to a lot more computing power, but it was just so much more expensive.
Yeah,
to run computations that size back then, and kind of problematic.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward to the late 2010s. You guys will probably remember that Carnegie Mellon was on the forefront of generating the no limit hold'em heads up bots at first, and then ultimately creating a 6 max bot as well. I believe the University of Alberta. They were the ones who first developed the limit hold'em bot, and then I think they created their own version of no limit, but I don't recall what the name of that one was. I know for Carnegie Mellon it was
Liberatus.
Yeah, but there was one before Liberatus. Pluribus was the 6 max. Liberatus was the second iteration. Was it Zero or something like that? Clodico.
Clodico, yeah.
Clodico, yeah.
Why are they gonna why can't they just call it Jim?
Jim Bob.
Because he's busy in the weight room.
Jim Bot.
Right.
That's what Jim is for.
Right.
Jim's busy.
With the development of those bots, though, and the suspicion that Furel, who was the main perpetrator in this bot, maybe perpetrator is the wrong word. I don't know how much criminal element I should attribute to this this organized entity when it's all said and done, but with him feeling like he was botted heads up in the limit streets, and then seeing the rise of Clodico, followed by Liberatus, followed by Pluribus at Carnegie Mellon, he and a group of math and comp sci students in Russia built a profitable poker bot operation. They basically took general GTO poker theory, combined it with AI and advanced computing to create poker playing software that was capable of outperforming most, if not all, human players. They were incredibly effective and basically started to mass populate the majority of the online platforms at the time, including winning major tournaments. And there was a part of the article that really caught my attention. I don't want to misquote it, and I should have wrote down the note, but the head of WPT Global was cited in the article, and he said, you have to understand that these bots generate a lot of liquidity, and effectively online sites prioritize liquidity over everything, because the way that they make money is by raking games. So you need games to exist in order to profit. They don't give a shit who wins or loses. So their incentives to police bots are very, very low, right? Bots are really helpful to the operators' climate because they keep games running 24/7. They don't really ultimately care who the winners and losers in games are. If they happen to be a relatively large winner that is going to kind of be a little bit predatory in the pool, maybe that then becomes a problem. But even still, now they just have an acquisition hurdle to overcome, which is always going to be the case with online operators. You're always trying to acquire new consumers anyway. But once you acquire them, you want to have games running. So he said that he had never used them, and no company he had ever worked for had used them to his knowledge. But he suspected that a lot of the smaller sites were armed with teams of bots in order to keep games running, in order to keep the liquidity flowing in, which to me makes a lot of sense, and also further kind of exemplifies why the community has been in charge, so to speak, of policing the online environment from botting for so long. Shout out to my man Tyler. He's the one who discovered the ACR bot ring, just over a year and a half ago. And, dovetailing this into that whole scandal, which still hasn't been resolved. To our knowledge, nearly no refunds have been made. The accusation that it was potentially a $10 million bot ring seems more real than ever with this information. It seems as though scaling it is absolutely no problem. And they had mentioned in the article that, some of the ways that sites will police this is asking you to play on camera for a certain period of time. And for a lot of these operators, they're doing this at scale. They just don't. They just shut down the operation and then boot it back up. You get a dozen new accounts, you fire the bots back in there, and you rinse and repeat. I imagine they don't keep much money on site, probably no more than they need for each day's operation, because they know that they're susceptible to being closed at any time. And from the player standpoint, this is kind of scary stuff. It doesn't make you feel super confident that you're getting a fair game. And for great players, specifically the ones that will be doing the most policing in this environment, they're probably winning versus a lot of these bots.
They probably don't care.
They're like the operator.
It's I'll just play when I want on my hours versus guys that I think I'm winning a little bit off of, and their bottom line keeps increasing every session.
Right.
I mean, they made it very clear that they don't care. There were a lot of signals to us.
There will be signs.
We had players pointing out hey guys, 50 new accounts just popped up on ACR from Kazakhstan. I don't think there's that many people from Kazakhstan that all of a sudden started playing poker, and their response was to get rid of locations temporarily.
You don't know about the Kazakhstan Poker Club, bro?
I mean, look, I feel bad for the one guy from Kazakhstan who started playing poker that month and got caught up in the...
For the love of the game.
But yeah, it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, the location turnoff was insane because you kind of could tell where new accounts are probably coming up from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was talking to a few people that played on the site, and we noticed this stuff fairly quickly. And I'm like the fish in this group at this sort of thing. But some of my friends were figuring out they just don't little exploits. Similar to you had a person call in. What was his name? Was that Tyler? Who called him from
No,
Australia?
it was the Australian kid. I can't recall his name off the top of my head.
That was a great interview. By
Yeah,
the
but
way.
basically he was using MDA to try to combat against the bots on Ignition.
Yeah.
And, this is just like a clear indicator that this obviously is, I mean, we already knew prior to this article that this was happening, but this is just like final confirmation. And here's where it gets worse. So as this business grew, they named it BF Corp, Bot Farming Corp. So at first they were just employing the bots themselves at scale, and they were making a bunch of money. But then they started to realize that it wasn't a sustainable business model, because you're just bleeding the player pools dry, right? So you constantly have to be acquiring new accounts. You have to be doing all of these things, but also on top of that, you have to keep infiltrating, I guess, like player pools and ecosystems that you won't just suck dry in the near term, right? Like you have to find something somewhat sustainable that can withstand your bot army that you're about to employ on it. And I think that was when they decided to make a pivot where they transitioned from botting themselves to selling the software. And we've all been propositioned in Discord by some random guy sending you a link of some sort. But they basically built like a franchise-like model. So like you were opening a Subway where it cost you X amount of dollars. They give you all of the template to get this off the ground. There's probably some profit share that goes back to them. So now they're not only employing the bot army at scale, but they're also getting an upfront fee for the usage of their software. This then basically seemed to run open for quite some period of time until some of the sites started to do a little bit better. They started to ban bots, forcing another adaptation. And at that point, they developed features that made their bots behave more human-like. And this is kind of like, if you recall back to when we were addressing Shamath and his prospects for what AI will be like in the future. He was talking at a global scale in a real-world sense, but he was using poker as the example. And he was basically saying, like, at some point, it'll come to be that AI will be able to outthink and outmaneuver humans, even in a game as complex as No Limit Hold'em.
And masquerade themselves as humans.
As humans, correct. Right. So, it looks as though they were trying to do this, but it was less about how they played, and it was more so adding in ways to not get caught by the operator's AI that's looking for certain things.
Like talking in the chat and and that kind of
random mouse movements,
right.
Random delays to action, so it's not always 20 seconds before they act.
Imagine they add in like the misclick 1 every 1,000 hands or something.
I mean,
maybe. I mean,
wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Start doing human things and.
So of course this made it increasingly more difficult for the sites to police, and led to a lot of what we've been reporting for the last year and a half or 2 years.
Rage quit after getting stacked.
That would be funny, actually.
Right, like they get stacked, they're supposed to wait till they're under the gun to leave, and then they just leave immediately.
Right.
An AI would never do that. They'd always take the free EV.
Right. Yeah.
I should not be part of a consulting firm.
You're only going to make the problem worse.
I know.
But yeah, so I think that, like this just lends a lot of credibility to concerns that we already had as a collective. It's not entirely doom and gloom. I do think that this article kind of points out ways that maybe this can be integrated in a positive way. I know that Bot Farm Corp is pivoting once again. Their ambitions for the future are really not to rake the poker economy over the coals. This is kind of like a weird one because it's almost like they had a moral come to Jesus meeting, like somewhere along the line of making all this money. But I don't think it was driven by ethics.
Easier to have morals when you're rich, right?
Yeah,
It's driven by to keep the company alive.
Yeah, I think it was driven by need. Like they saw the decline of the poker economy, and they kind of said to themselves, like, all right, well, we skinned this sheep.
Let's find a new one.
Yeah, what now can we move on to? So, effectively, they called it the King of the Hill problem, which was that the ecosystem had become a game of King of the Hill, where a few highly skilled players and or AI bots were just dominating the liquidity pool and sucking it dry effectively. This was leaving amateurs disillusioned and driving them out of the game. According to their data, about 80% of amateurs lost money quickly and left after playing fewer than 1,000 hands.
It's not a lot.
This loss of new players jeopardized the industry's future and forced them to pivot into a new model. So now they're trying to develop what they call Poker Tinder. And I wonder if they're working hand in hand at all with WPT Global, because this is something that they do. They call it skill matching.
Skill-based matchmaking?
Yeah, basically. So when you play cash on WPT Global, what they'll try to do is create a balanced table. So I think people think that it's segregated liquidity, and that's not actually, to my understanding, what they do. Segregated liquidity would be if you're winning X amount of big blinds per 100 at this stake level, you're put into one pool, and everybody less than that threshold is put into another pool. So basically, like, you're segregated off from the weaker players. To my understanding, that's not what's actually happening. The way I understand it is for every player making X amount of big blinds per 100, they want a player who is, sorry, let me rephrase. For every player that is less than X amount of big blinds per 100 at the table, they want to include one or fewer player that's winning more than that. So essentially, any game that you sit in is going to be a healthy mix of like amateurs and pros. Something that you see mainly in like the private live scene. Any great private game is never going to, or very rarely going to be 8 recreationals. It's usually going to be like 5 recs and 3 pros, 6 recs and 2 pros, something along those lines, like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio of skill-based non-skill-based players versus skill-based. And I think, to my understanding, that's what WPT Global is attempting to accomplish. And it sounds as though that's the pivot that Bot Farm Corp has moved on to. So they basically said it's a matchmaking system that pairs players of similar skill levels, ensuring fairer games and keeping more casual players in the ecosystem. We see this in chess too, right? Like, you're never going to see a 1200 play a 2K rated player. It's just not worth anybody's time.
Yeah.
Right.
It's ELO.
Right.
Efficient.
But the difference is that in chess, you're only rewarded by ego.
And people still cheat.
Well,
right.
It's based on win rate entirely, though.
I don't know. I assume that has to be a lot of it, but maybe they take other considerations like VPIP, aggression factor, things that like might make games good otherwise.
I thought it would be based on like how close you play to optimal, based on whatever their bot thinks optimal is, and in which case that's kind of a bad system, right? Because you could easily game that system by playing less than optimal so that you get put in better pools. But if
same
you do
kind
it
of
by
true win rate.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Well, you could, but then you at least, it's a financial cost to hustling.
That's true.
Rather than, there's still a financial cost of playing bad, but
right.
But also, like, when you do it by win rate, you just have like fish randomly go on a heater, and then they get put in the wrong pool or whatever.
Right.
It's like, I don't know if there's a perfect...
If it's like soccer where like you get bumped up and then you get relegated again when it's clear that you're the biggest loser in the pool.
Yeah.
It's just, pricey.
It kind of gamifies poker, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, you move up in levels.
How funny that we're trying to gamify.
I know. I was thinking, like, what if you just played like really bad, like at low stakes until you knew you were in like you had a low score, and then you just start playing higher stakes. I don't know if it changes stake by stake or how that would work.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Because that's an easy way to hustle a game, right?
Of course. You just play low stakes,
lose money at
play
like
terrible,
25 cents, 50 cents.
Right. And then you're like, okay, they think I'm bad, now I'll play higher stakes.
Yeah, it seems difficult to implement because if you do it it's just a way to hustle it no matter how they have the system worked out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be like blackjack where if all of a sudden you're betting really big and you're winning, they're like, hold up.
Right.
But, it would have to be a very elegant system.
Yeah, the real problem, I think, at the end of the day is that being that it's effectively zero-sum game, slightly negative-sum game when you factor in the rake, the incentives just don't align. There's no alignment of incentives to have... Like, the operators want to protect the ecosystem, so they're happy to segregate pros from recs, right? Recreationals want to have a chance to actually win, so they're also happy to be segregated from pros and get to play with other recs.
Mm-hmm.
But without the pros, you lose the liquidity. The pros, just as much as the bots, represent game starters, people that will keep games flowing for long durations, right? So you basically would have to move, like, as an operator, you would have to move completely off the rake model. You would have to find some other way to make money from your members, whether that is some sort of like fee that you charge in order to protect them and keep them in softer games. Like in private games, often instead of rake, you pay a VIP tax, where when you win, you pay 5% of your earnings. When you lose, it's on the house. For good players, that tax is exponential. But for, I thought about this a lot, and as I was about to say it out loud, it didn't sound right. For players who are very volatile, that win, like, say, 51% of their sessions, but may actually be big winners in the game because when they win, they have a really high win rate, the tax is exponential, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, you're losing so many sessions. That then that has to be true then of the losing players as well, right? They're paying a disproportional amount of the rake if they're losing 65% of their sessions, so to speak.
I don't know.
Well, they lose all that money, and then when they win, when they finally win, they're taxed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like,
I guess it depends on how many hands you're playing, right?
Why would hands have anything to do with
rake?
It? It's not. I'm not talking about rake. Keep up. I'm saying you pay a fee on your wins.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You get wrecked that way.
Yeah, of course. So it's like,
wait. So in this scenario, the fish are paying a fee on their wins too.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I assume that there's probably more room to give them a break.
Reduced fee or no fee.
Like rake back of some sort or reduced fee.
This is like a tip to the game runner.
Yeah, that's how they frame it. So
yeah,
I mean,
the 51% guy gets ravaged.
Right, but so does everybody beneath that, I think. Right?
Well, yeah, the 49% guy definitely gets
Because
ravaged.
it's it's not the frequency at which you win, it's the frequency at which you lose that makes the tax exponential. If you won 99% of your sessions, you're just paying a flat 5%, right? Every single time. But if you only win 51% of your sessions, you're paying 5% on all those wins. And then effectively, when you lose, you don't get to get the refund on the difference. You know what I mean? So there's like some delta there where it feels like you're being double taxed a little bit. Right? So like,
this is kind of how taxes in poker actually work as well. If you're an MTT player and you don't have a winning year every year, it's really bad for your bottom line.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a great way of framing it, right? The 12-month calendar cycle effectively represents session by session in this particular instance, where if you remove those boundaries, then it all works itself out to being a flat 5%. So yeah, I don't know what the new model would be, but it seems as though that's the clear delineator to get incentives realigned. If operators moved off of rake being the thing that drove their bottom line, then they would have a hell of a lot more incentive to just retain and provide liquidity to their VIP players, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. If they're just getting like flat fees off of these guys, and each customer is worth X amount of dollars for Y amount of days that you keep them, then ultimately you just want them to be playing in a zero-sum game where everybody breaks even, right? Like the difficulty becomes when they're playing in a supposed zero-sum game where everybody's losing to the rake. And then you throw a winning player in there on top of it, right? Because now they're losing to the rake and the winning player, and it compounds, and that just becomes very destructive. I've gotten a bit off topic.
Well, it kind of ties back in because I don't know if you want to get into Lappin's article, but Lappin wrote an article as well about the bots. It's sort of like a follow-up article about the bots actually being used by poker sites and poker apps. They call them liquidity bots, and they just, like, the actual website sticks these bots in the pool to keep the games going. And I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, but that's like, it's weird because on the one hand, it's good that games are running. On the other hand, nobody wants to find out that they're playing against bots. If you're a professional, you really don't want to figure that out because that's terrible for your bottom line.
Right.
And if you're a amateur, I don't think you're looking for that either. Like the point of poker is to challenge yourself against other human beings, I think.
Yeah.
That's the appeal to me, and I don't see why it would be a
Getting
different appeal
paid to try
anyone
to
else.
beat GTO Wizard seems like a fool's errand.
Yeah, that as well. But it's almost scarier to find out that, and I think Lapin's article gets into this, they change the bot's skill set based on the pool that they're in or the players that they're up against or the player that they're up against. So if they're playing against a really good reg, they'll use like, the top end bot with the best, I guess, compiled data, we'll say. And then if they're playing against weaker players, like they'll use the easier bot. And basically they've found a way to always have a positive win rate post rake, but not too big of a win rate that it's taking too much out of the pool.
Yeah, I was going to say that probably the goal would be to have the bots break even.
Yeah,
and then if it does win,
they're making money. Let's be clear. Like,
so what are the sites doing with that money that they're making? Like if they're doing this, then that money should go back to the.
Yeah, well, I think it's just
community.
part of the profits,
right,
of the site.
Yeah,
in addition to rake and stuff, is my understanding.
Yeah.
I need to. It's a long article. I need to reread it to like make 100% sure of that.
Right.
But if you're an amateur, obviously, I'm just gonna go ahead of regs not wanting this or pros because I think that's pretty clear.
Well, if you're winning 10 bigs per 100 as a pro and you know that there's bots, you probably don't care.
Why?
Because you're winning 10 big blinds per 100.
You mean yeah, if you find out that there are bots in the pool.
What do you care?
If you're beating the bots or you're beating enough of the non-bots to not matter.
The reason why you care is because if these bots are winning money, then that's money that's going out of
being sucked out
a non-infinite amount of money that you could have won in the future.
But would you rather not play? You'd rather have the game where you get to win 10
you like
bigs.
poker, don't you? You like playing poker, don't you?
Well, okay, that's a good argument, but I think you'd rather you provide the liquidity / human beings provide the liquidity. If it's like, okay, so let's say it's an app game and it doesn't normally run unless these bots are going, then I think that's sort of a like a necessary evil to some extent, you could call it, because like it's keeping the games running. But still, if you're an amateur and you find out that there are bots beating you for money, like you're playing against robots, and presumably you're losing money in this game, and you find out there are robots that are beating you, and no matter how much better you get, they're going to keep upping the bot's ability, so it'll just keep beating you by a little bit.
Yeah.
That's kind of infuriating, and that kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Maybe you don't play poker again.
That's for sure. At that point, though, if the bots will still exist and the guy that's winning 10 bigs per 100 in the pool is still beating said bots for that number, they're probably not going to care that the bots are there. But if the bots are better and then the win rate goes from 10 bigs to 0 and they're losing to rake, at that point, they would probably just stop playing poker. And then the game would die.
Yeah,
so the reg cares because at some point, if the amateurs found out, their game would disappear.
Yeah, I also think you should care as a reg because the site is taking an extra amount. I mean, I guess if the site is transparent that they have bots running, or the app, if they're transparent that they have bots running to keep liquidity going, that's one thing, and that's like what you've agreed to going into it. But if you find out later on through an article that Lapin wrote or whatever that there are bots creating liquidity that were in your pool, like that still hurts you as a pro because it's taking eventual money out of the pool. That
I think that they should
is getting sucked out.
Right, like if I'm not saying it's a good idea to have bots, but I mean I guess understand for the liquidity, but I'm not saying it's a good idea. But if they were going to do it, then I think the site should try to have the bots simulate the community as much as possible. So you have some bots that win and some bots that lose, and so it's just more players in the field essentially. That's representative of the skill sets of everybody that plays.
I know we're a ways away from this, but what about the idea of a regulatory body stepping in and saying like, okay, everybody can have bots on their site, both consumers and operators alike, but
they have to be identified.
Well, they have to be identified, number one, and number two, they can only play for rakeback. So if they're beating the game for greater than 0.0x big blinds, they're banned and their account is seized.
I mean, that makes more sense to me, at least. By the way, Landon, to go back to your thing, if you look at your win rate across your entire lifetime, it's still affected by bots being in the pool. So, like, saying that your past win rate was 10 doesn't really change my answer as to whether or not it hurts me that there are bots in the pool.
Well,
regardless
I'm saying
of whether they keep the game going.
You're talking that if your win rate was 10 pre-bot. I'm talking about if your win rate is still 10 bigs with bots in the pool, because you're beating the fish and the bots.
But it's that your inevitable your win rate in the long term will go down if winning bots are in the pool, like compared to, because there's not an infinite number of people coming in and playing poker and losing money.
But if you're still winning versus the bots, and without the bots there would be no game, you kind of don't care.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
You currently don't care, but you care for the future.
Maybe, right? It depends how long it takes for you to get down to zero. Or let's just say you knew that you had a 10-year timeline to have your win rate slowly decrease over time. At some point, you'll be like, hey, maybe I don't want to play anymore. But when it comes to the short term, I don't think that the reg cares too much. Obviously,
like they'd rather have their win rate decline over 10 years than the game just not exist in a year.
Or yeah, exactly. They don't make money if they don't get to play.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, sure, poker is a game that has skill and competition, but money is the primary factor for someone that's playing professionally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fair point, and I need to think about it more. I do question whether or not the game will not run if there aren't bots. I kind of feel like it's more of a greedy thing, and they're running more games, so they can collect rake on more tables, and they are happy to do that because you have 3 bots at each table and they're all profiting slightly, then you're making tons of money and you're creating more tables.
Right. And I guess where my argument for the winning reg is, if you get to 6 table with your win rate, add more tables and some fish fill in here and there, you're loving it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're only playing 2 tables versus fish, and your win rate will still probably be relatively similar because the bots will still exist at that table too.
But to be fair, like that isn't the part of the player pool we should really be considerate of, because they're just a derivative of the bots. Right. If you eliminated all bots from the pool altogether, then we would just be talking about these winning regs that are just sucking up 10 big blinds per 100.
Right. Bots are not good for the majority of the player pool.
Right, but neither are big winners. And like we see this on GG Poker where they're like very limiting to having like massive winners.
Yeah, you have to protect the bottom half of the player field.
Yeah. It's a tricky equation of economics, I think. I don't know that there's an obvious answer.
Economics plus like relatively fair. Because if someone's winning, you just ban them.
But nothing's going to be fair, right? Operators don't care about fair outside of people not cheating. They don't give a shit at the end of the day about the big winning pro. That's why live is so fucking different, right? Because the big winning pro is very marketable. They do care about Daniel and Phil and Ivy and everybody along those lines, because that further allows them to expand their brand. You get the biggest winner in your events over the course of a decade to align with you, and now all of a sudden they become synonymous. You're able to leverage their name and likeness as much as your own, and your brand continues to grow and becomes a staple in this industry. But online, everybody's nameless, everybody's faceless. They're just a moniker.
Just out for yourself, and the site.
It's very much.
It's just an avatar sucking up all the liquidity.
Just everything about online poker is so much more pure when you're talking about the data side of things. You're so much closer to running a true sample that you can start to see things emerge, like statistical patterns emerge that are actually probably relatively close to true. Like, only online players know their actual win rates.
And then once they win a certain amount of money, you kick them out because they're winning too much.
Well, that's the thing, is like whenever you are in an environment where the data actually does ring true, then the things that we know in theory come to fruition, which is that the big winners suck up all the money, right? It doesn't really happen live because nobody is able to play at enough scale. Like, even if you look at like guy like Ali, who was just smashing the live scene for quite some period of time, it was a very siloed, isolated experience, right? It was just mainly events 10K and above, that were strictly,
Small field.
televised small field
Yeah,
events.
there's not like a handful of guys who are just taking all the money out of the 2-5 game in Vegas.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not like Ali can both at the same time be smashing high rollers and obliterating the WSOP circuit at the same time. Right? But
You have to pick a lane.
But specifically bots can do this, and this was like a big issue that Daily Fantasy has run into and hasn't seemed to solve.
Like having bots play cash games while playing tournaments, while doing all of these other things online.
Well, in Daily Fantasy, like the difference between that and poker is that it's set it and forget it, right? So it doesn't matter if you're playing a 10-cent buy-in or $10,000 buy-in. Your lineup is just worth whatever EV it's worth. Like if your lineup is worth 4% ROI, then on a 10K buy-in, you're going to be making $400, and on a 10-cent buy-in, you're going to be making 0.4 cents.
You just enter every competition.
You just enter them all because you're printing, right? You're literally just turning a bot farm loose.
I also imagine that's a lot harder to detect because in poker, at least you can see patterns and like.
Well, it's not even about detection. It's just the lay of the land. There's no real. There's no real rules against it, right? Like they started to reduce. It's been a long time since I played daily, since they outlawed it here in Vegas. But when it was exiting here, like 2019ish, they started to reduce the multi entries. So like the big major prize pools where it was $1 million the first, you could fire like 50 entries, right? And people who were really sharp would just model out. Similar to like what we're doing with Survivor, like, okay, let me try to build 50, lineups that are somewhat contrarian. They give me different exposures to popular players and contrarian picks. And like, I basically just paint the board and give myself a better shot to win. And the recreational money had no fucking shot. Mm-hmm. Just no shot. The only reason that it became like somewhat close for the sharps is because the rake was so high. And now I think that the rake is still probably pretty high, but I believe they've reduced the amount of entries you can put into any one pool. But they don't limit you from, like, if you play a 10K, they don't say, no, you're not allowed to play this 10-cent buy-in. Where maybe they could police that if they wanted to, right? You want a bunch of newbies, so to speak, in buy-ins below X amount of dollars, right? But the way this parallels to poker is that it's just so different when you're able to do things in mass, right? Whenever you're able to put in actual massive volume. Like right now we have a botting problem, but if by some miracle we were able to Thanos this thing and just eliminate bots tomorrow, sites are going to have a winning player problem. Players are getting better. The divide between entry level players and elites is growing more and more by the day. And there's a larger collection of people that are tapping on the glass of being big winners, right? So what that means now is the necessary skill set to even break even, that bar continues to raise more and more. 15 years ago, you didn't need to be a studied player to be a break-even player. You just knew how to rub two nickels together and think your way through a river bet decision. But now, bare minimum just to break even, you probably have to be like loosely versed in theory at most stake levels. Maybe not the micros, but like probably everything above 25 NL, 50 NL and above, you probably have to have like a pretty sound fundamental game theory strategy just to break even.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like as that bar continues to raise, liquidity pools continue to shrivel. And I don't see any great way to correct this. Like there's a utilization to bots that can be more fair to everybody involved that is handled by the operator themselves, right? Rather than just giving rake back to winning players and losing players alike, you can do a mix of things where it's like you don't give rake back to anybody winning over X amount of big blinds, but you put losing bots in the pool.
Yeah.
Right? So they essentially are able to reclaim some rake that way. And then you just straight up give rake back to your VIP players, the ones that are losing big blind per 100 or more. That's a good way, I think, of maybe weaponizing this in a positive way. But I don't know. I'm not paid to make these decisions. I'm just kind of speculating a bit.
Yeah, it seems interesting. Add
I wonder how
Extra.
the community respond to something like that, like saying like, "Hey, we do have bots on our site, but they're losing." Like, are you
Right.
okay with that?
Right.
Like, because people be like, "Are they losing? Are they not?"
I think the problem
I
is,
guess losing
it's just-
how?
Yeah.
Like,
just
well, they're not gonna tell you
overall,
that.
They're not going to tell you, but like,
No, sorry.
they just have a loss
mean,
rate
like-
of X amount of big blinds per 100.
That's what I was going with.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do they quantify that number
Right.
though? Like versus who are they
Doesn't-
losing that much money?
just
not
overall, they're just like they have a negative
Right, but
win
I
rate.
But
think
how
what
can
I
they
think what
know
Landon is
that
saying is that-
number?
They play hands and they have a win rate.
Yeah.
Play hands against who?
The pool that
The
they're
pool.
in.
So you have to soft launch them first then.
I mean, yeah.
Like you'd have to not tell anybody that you're having players that lose because how else would you know that they lose?
Or you could just put them in a play money arena and see what their win rate is. Or I don't know.
Yeah.
There's ways.
I mean,
that they
I
could-
think eventually the bots are going to be so sophisticated that you're going to be able to like adjust how much they win, how much they lose, right? I mean,
you could also just like,
or how skilled they are.
yeah,
and
you
how
could also just
yeah.
teeter with the algorithm and just say like, okay, if a decision is making X amount of EV, choose another one, right? So like choose the lesser. If it's between X amount of big blinds per 100 in win rate versus less than, you choose the less than.
I guess where I'm going with that is when you do that, you're making it lose less versus theory, not versus the
right.
pool.
Yeah, yeah.
You
that's
see what I'm
fair.
saying? Like you,
Right,
you're
but
saying,
you'll just tweak. Like if it's demonstrating a win rate in the pool, then
Yeah.
you tweak it to lose.
Well, I'm saying you'd have to introduce the bot by saying this bot is losing 10 bigs per 100 against GTO, right? Just against pure optimal. They go in the pool and still win 10 big blinds per 100 versus people. You'd have to do something different.
Yeah, you have to make it.
yeah,
lose
of
less,
course.
right?
I mean,
But
yes.
just saying that they have a loss rate doesn't mean they're inherently going to lose in the pool. You're saying they're losing versus machine.
No, if you say it has a loss rate, it's because you have a provable loss rate. Just
Right.
the same way that if I say I'm
Yes.
winning 10 big blinds per 100, it's because I have a sample size of X where I've won 10 big blinds per 100.
Against the pool.
Sure.
But where I'm going with this is when you're saying
I
loss
know where you're
rate-
going with this. It's just you are so pedantic right now. This doesn't mean anything. Like the better question was what Brian asked, which is, would people be okay with this? And I think that the answer is largely no, because nothing's regulated.
Right.
Right. So in a non-regulated environment, are you just going to trust Nagy to be like, yo, man, we got bots out there, but they've been giving money to you guys. You have no idea. Look, here's the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
Last month, we lost millions.
Yeah, I mean, if
You
it's
like playing poker, don't you?
if it's
Went right to
unregulated,
end game talent.
Yeah, I mean, if it's unregulated, you're definitely not going to trust it. But like, what
Yeah.
if WSOP did something like this?
Well, if they did something like this, then, you know, I think we would have either a little bit more confidence or would be able to see or demand, I guess, a little bit more of a public.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to go through
statement.
gaming,
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly.
So then gaming would have the
I do
you know,
worry
the
that gaming
results.
is like way too far behind whenever it comes to this type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like online poker is their biggest focus. I wouldn't think.
Right. I imagine
Yeah,
it's
think
very
of-
low priority.
Yeah, right.
I highly doubt they're sophisticated enough to understand what would be going on here. It's just like not even their forte.
No, right.
Right. Yeah. I kind of have concerns, to say the least. But if I had to choose, I would take the regulated market 100% of the time.
The bot free one,
We assume it's bot free.
allegedly.
I mean, I have to assume that it's tougher to launch these bots on WSOP than it would be anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, Lappin's messaging me on the side, and he said, one thing to add is site creating an environment that looks more attractive via bots, and so helps them to build their site, gives them a competitive advantage over sites that are running clean games.
It's true.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah,
there's more
that's true.
action. There's more perceived volume of people coming
Mhm.
through. Like, oh, of course I can 6 table here
Yeah.
versus
Right.
I have 1 table on a clean game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's problematic too because nobody's going to admit it, right? Like the bots just have to get sussed out. So like we're very confident that Ignition is botting, whether or not it's happening internally or they're just like dropping the ball security wise. Like we know that there's a heavy amount of bots on there. We know that at least at one point in time, if not still, ACR was full of bots. A lot of these new startups, you should be probably a little bit cautious of. I know that there was a new launch yesterday, or maybe today. Phenom Poker is out in the mix. I'm not saying that they have bots. I have no fucking clue. But
Well, their website said they're going to be 100% bot free. So
Okay, I mean,
There you go.
Whether it's like true or not, at least putting that in
Yeah,
writing
that's
is
true.
something you can hold their feet to the fire on.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when that's out there in bold and somebody possibly finds that it's not true, you have to back that up in some sort of capacity, right? So not saying anything, I think, is the safer, easier, more cowardice route that a lot of sites take because they're just looking to cover their own ass.
I feel a bit naive right now because I just made the assumption that all sites were, like, without announcing themselves, bot free. Yeah, and yeah, it's like I didn't have to seek out whether or not the site was bot free because I just assumed that was implied in being a poker site. But now, I'm feeling a bit silly
Now we know
about
a
making
little
that
more.
assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky for us, we live here, man.
Yeah.
We live here. The games are good right down the street. And we're old.
Live
so we
poker,
don't have to do this much longer.
Yeah, live poker is a very attractive option these days. It has been for
It
many
always
years.
has
I mean,
been,
we
yeah.
weren't like in the dark about this. I think we just didn't know if it was just players using bots or if it was actually websites.
Yeah.
You're just
I
making
think
a
that's true.
decision of playing in a game that you know is clean. You probably have a good win rate versus playing online where you can get in more volume and you kind of just don't care to an extent.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that there are a lot of players who are just good enough where as long as they have win rate, they don't really consider any other options.
Yeah, they're like, who cares if there's bots or not? I'm still winning my 5K a month or whatever, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Why would I be sad? Why would I want anything to change if I know that I can count on this if I play enough volume?
Yeah. And then they come for them.
It's almost like a bad thing and to an extent if bots get found out and then games stop running because now they lose that.
They lose their liquidity.
They lose their job to an extent.
To an extent, yeah.
And then they'd have to go play live and do it that way.
Yeah, I hate these doom and gloom episodes, man. I don't feel that bearish on poker as a whole. I really do think that the game is alive and well. In its
Live
purest
is
form.
thriving.
Live is thriving.
I wonder what the ratio between like Rex and pros on online versus live is.
I've always been very much in the camp that
way more
recreational is just
play
like don't
live.
exist online.
Right. That in my mind, it's just like everybody out there trying to make a living playing poker.
When I talk to
online,
guys
but
that qualify themselves,
that can't be true.
When I talk to guys that qualify themselves as recreationals online, they're guys that like I'm very positive are winning a substantial amount at like live 510.
Guys that are trying to get better and probably have access
They
to
all
people.
have like very solid fundamentals, good baseline knowledge. They all play perfectly pre.
Right. Like how many people are just going online and playing poker just for pure enjoyment and fun?
Very, very
It's not like,
few.
it's not like the 2008 again.
No, yeah.
Because that was what existed. That's what made the game so good. It was just like everybody was just playing because it was fun and there was a chance to win a lot of money. But now it's like
I think that does happen live a lot though.
Right, of course.
But
Yes,
the people
that's what I'm saying.
that are now playing live have stopped playing online because they think they're getting cheated, and they kind of are when it
Right.
comes to the bots and things.
Right.
along
They
those
always
lines.
thought that. Now there's just a little bit more proof that
It's just
they might be.
It's just like widely known that it's just online is so much tougher.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, well, if I have X amount of money that I'm going to disperse to the poker community, I'm going to go do it live. I get to look people in the face, have more fun, but it's more social.
Get more bang for your buck. It's
Right,
slow.
yeah.
Well, to a degree, there's also less of a sample, like Matt's saying, where someone can think that they're great at poker, but keep losing over and over again because they get unlucky.
Right.
Where you're playing online, you just keep
you get exposed way more.
you keep dumping
quickly
money in every
online.
Sunday,
Yeah.
and you just
Yeah.
keep losing. It's like, well, either I'm getting cheated, I'm not lucky online, or the software is out to get me. Where if you're playing live, it's like, oh, I got really unlucky this one thing. I'm going to go back and that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, Lapid made a point in the chat, and I think this is like for everybody's psyche that's ever played the game. He said it's fundamentally important that we know that when we get too outed, some other person benefited. And that's like true. Like the last thing you want is to question whether or not that hand where you got unlucky and the 8% came through, whether or not it was on the up and up.
Right? You want to see it happen.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen call it crazy runouts live. You know, it's like that only happens online. It's like no, it doesn't. It happens right here.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, I think that circles back to the inability to kind of think probabilistically. But That's a whole different conversation.
Right. It's like if I played the same 8% spot or 92 to 8% spot live, I win it every time. Because you don't get to run it 50 times, where you actually get to lose here and there.
Right, and also, when you lose it, you might be running it twice, so you still split the pot. You're whatever. There's a million reasons why it's less important live, but most of it just revolves around trust. You could see everything that's happening. You could trust your eyes.
Right.
That lack of trust is ever present online. You just don't know who you're up against. You don't know what kind of tools they may be employing. You don't know how up and up the site is. There's just a million reasons to question like every single decision.
On ACR, they have like animations when like brutal turns or rivers come in, where it's like and like breaks the screen kind of. It's like, you want to trust the dealer doing that when you're at the casino, or do you want to see some random ace fall out of nowhere and it's like like the whole screen cracks and now you're out of the tournament? Like, I don't want to see that anymore, man.
Yeah, don't fucking needle me, man. What do you got coming up next, Jess?
Wait, I just wanted to say, you just reminded me of one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a poker tournament. Is at the World Series. These two guys get it all in on the turn. One guy has top pair, and the other guy has a set. And the dealer just looks at the guy's top pair. He's drawing dead, obviously, and he goes, and just doesn't deal a river card and pushes the other guy. That's the earthquake.
Yeah,
live poker right there.
It's all over for that guy.
That actually is truly remarkable. Shout out to all the cutthroat dealers out there.
Let's just save the formalities, man.
It was like, I wanted to hate on him for it, but I was just so impressed by his lack of giving a shit.
Saved you time. Got that guy the fuck out of there. Let's move on. All right, Jesse, as always, thank you for joining us. This was a fun one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back tomorrow at noon Pacific. We're going to be joined by Mark Goon, who is embarking upon a challenge all his own. You guys may know him. He's a coach for Hungry Horse Poker. He set out to do the $100 an hour low stake, no limit challenge. Kind of originated here on the pod when I offered the Crossbook Guapo at 1-3. He's out there in the streets trying it, and granted, he's in the LA streets, so it's a give and take.
100 an hour?
100 an hour.
He's also playing pretty deep 2-5.
2-5?
Yeah.
I mean,
so he's playing LA 2-5
still,
but it's also LA Rake. So it's like, we'll talk to him about it tomorrow. We're going to get all the details down, see how close he is to being able to maintain this sort of win rate, how doable he thinks it is in today's landscape. We'll have all of that for you guys and more as more news comes out between now and then. We'll see you guys noon Pacific tomorrow.
Peace.
Peace.